And it begins. Here we go. Right, so I can see everyone. I don't know how. It's the first thing I'm doing here for a while, so I'm going to keep it as calm as I can, but... So, I'm starting quite quickly. I know not people are going here. This is more for like a future thing, so if people come back to it, they can go through it. So I've been having a lot of discussions with people who talk about a switch theory, and I've gained a lot of evidence that says that it didn't happen and such like that, so I'm gonna go through a lot of it. And I could go through like a book, but I thought going through John Hammer, I believe that's how you say his name, go through his presentation. I believe, if I remember correctly from watching it, it's mostly the same as what is like sort of Gardner shown and everything. So yeah. Then yeah. Then I'm gonna go through it. So I'm gonna go point by point. I may not go through all of it, and I'm gonna be pausing it now again because I do want to go through the evidence between points. I'm gonna have some. I don't think. So I'm going to do my best and get all this sorted. So hopefully I can get this all done and well. And not many people are going to be here, but as I said, if people do come in, we can talk and I can answer stuff. I'm not going to be fully knowledgeable about everything, but I want to go through the points that I know I can talk about, because I've got a lot of evidence against the switch theory, and it's been clearly debunked, but some people don't get the memo, so I'm going to hopefully give a bit more of a live interpretation to show more information and just off the head stuff. I've got no script or anything. I'm literally just going to work off images I have on file from Titanic and Olympic, because those are the main two on the subjects, and I'm going to show how we know that's either false or true or something like that. So let's have a go. And how well you can hear it. I've just chosen a random one here. There's like 5 more than I've chosen.
For the first time to author John Heyman.
I'll try and get the audio sorted, so don't mind about that.
And what was the real truth behind the sinking of RMS Titanic in 1912? Taking us back 100 years to the famous Titanic disaster, which hit an iceberg and sank, right? Well, maybe it did. John covers inconsistencies with the official tale. Dear me, not that one again. Famous names in the finance world: Rothschilds, Rockefeller, JP Morgan, and possibly a business venture that didn't work out.
Oh yeah, he talked about bloody JP Morgan as well. I've thought a lot about JP Morgan, but yeah.
Possibly paid for with innocent lives.
I'll probably pause now and again so I can talk. It's also, I forgot this part about JP Morgan here. I don't know JP Morgan's entire life. I know vague stuff about him, but I know the evidence shows that it's very unlikely that he was going onto the ship. I'll give a briefing. People say that he had a ticket when I don't believe there's any evidence for that, or at least not that I can recall. There is also evidence that he was to meet a organizer because he was shipping a lot of his artwork across to the United States because of those French laws. So there was a problem in London about it when he was doing his London collection, so he had to meet an organizer, and that was in the middle of April. We got a telegram of that. I don't have a picture of it. From, I believe it's the end of March, might be March 27th, where he called that, or he telegraphed that organizer saying, let's meet. And I think he just said a couple of weeks' time, so it was around Titanic's voyage. So that enough is to say that he wasn't thinking of going on Titanic. Thirdly, he was to be in an art exhibition on the 23rd of April. Or the 27th, one of the two. I'm pretty sure the 23rd. I will get a picture of that because I have the article. So this is the article that from the New York Times. It was published at this date, so he was to attend. You can see it's JP Morgan. He was going to attend a Venice Arts expedition on the 23rd. And so that obviously would have taken his time as well. So he's not going on Titanic because he has to be in Italy at an art expedition. And obviously he's not going to go from the art expedition to, or he's not going to go across to America and then come back in time. That was not possible. Titanic would have reached New York by, let's say it's the 17th, because that's likely, usually takes about a week. And then it'll wait 3 days because Titanic was an Olympic set sail from New York on every Saturday. It was always a fixed day. They get there on usually on a Wednesday. If they get it early or late, that's fine. But again, it gives them time to do a bit of cleaning and also get all the coal in. So it was a Saturday they would have left. Olympic did that every single time. Titanic would have then left on that day, which would have been, the Wednesday would have been the 17th. 18th, 19th, 20th. So he would have left on 20th, and then obviously they've got 3 days for Titanic to get over the Atlantic. And unless it's going ludicrous speed, or speeds that we were seeing like on the bloody SS United States, it ain't happening. So he wasn't going to make it if he were on Titanic, so obviously there was no idea that he was going to be on Titanic. Hopefully the mic is catching my words, so I have to pretty much lips it, which is a bit annoying, but oh well. Right. I'm going to skip to where you get started. Right.
The real story about the sinking of the Titanic. Just first of all, can everyone hear me at the back? Okay. Complex little text.
I'm going to skip through if he's just yappering on and just get to the main points.
Quite a complex, large tale. So what I've tried to do, I've put together a PowerPoint presentation that hopefully tries to simplify it. You must bear in mind that there are 2 or even 3 strands running concurrently through the whole story. And of necessity, I do tend to skip from one to the other and back again. And I try to make it make sense, but please bear with me if there's bits that you don't follow, because like I said, so I'll do my best. Okay.
Right. Ah, Titanic.
We all know what that ship is. We've had it thrusted as...
Should I get the images? They're not going to be very good quality. I should probably get them up. Right.
So almost from being this high, this story has been part of our folklore for as long as anybody can remember in living memory. So we all know what that ship is.
That is this photograph. You can see the ship here. I can't remember which ship it is. I think it's just a ferry. This is the image you're talking about. It's Titanic in April 10th, so actually it's leaving Southampton, I believe. You can see anchor's been raised, so obviously I believe it's after it's been released, so they kind of wanted to get out of Solent quickly. So I believe it is 10th, or at least I have it labelled as the 10th. Yeah, this is the image he's looking at. You can tell it's Titanic, and you can see the nameplate. Huzzah. But he's going to deny that, so...
Not the Titanic.
Oh, but it is. Anyway, I know what he's going to say, so get on with it.
Identical twin sister of the Olympic. So what do we know about what happened on that night of 14th, 15th of April 1912? Not an awful lot, really. Although...
Well, we do. There are 2 inquiries about it.
Everyone thinks that they know the story. Well, trust me, you don't. And this is what we're coming to now. We know for sure that a very large ship sank in the early hours of the 15th of April. And we know that there were more than 1,500 lives lost. And that 700 survivors were rescued by another ship, the Carpathia. But once you said that, you said everything. Everything else is really up for question, seriously, and I'm going to show you how that is the case. So let's start by having a fresh look at some of the facts of the matter, shall we? Moving swiftly onwards. Yeah, so to come up with the story that I've come up with, obviously it wasn't all my work, but there's a lot of my own research gone into this, and a lot of the stuff in there is stuff that is unique to me. So where did I get it from? Well, this is where I got my information from. I looked at the transcripts of both inquiries. There were 2 inquiries about
Yep.
the Titanic disaster. One was the American inquiry, one was the British. Looked at both of those.
The actual inquiries are public, so if you didn't know, you can just type in Titanic inquiry, and usually it's the first one to come up. It's got both of them, so it's the American, British, and all the days. It's got a transcript of all of them. This is likely where he got it from as well. This website's been around for so long, I couldn't tell you when it was made. But if you ever want to read through the inquiries, then here you go. I think I've read through them 3 or 4 times, but it was probably COVID when I last read it. It's been a long time, and I probably need to go through it again and go through my notes with it.
I've looked at Howland and Wolff public records. Howland and Wolff was the shipyard that built the ships. Okay, various other sources, libraries, internet, blah blah blah. And the one thing that really struck me about it all was that there were so many unanswered questions and anomalies with the official story.
Well, we'd have to see.
Hang on a minute. Let's have a closer look at this. So what does the official story consist of? It's basically all those things.
See if I can find one that shows it all.
Yeah, okay. So at the risk of just standing here reading the slides, it's basically all propaganda from the White Star Line. Dozens and dozens of eyewitness accounts, hardly any of which agree with each other. Contemporary newspaper reports, which I'm sure some of you are aware of this phenomenon. Whenever there's a disaster that's not as if...
Sorry. See if I can find an image that's video that shows all of it. Ah, I found a better one. Apologies. Where were we? 5 minutes. Ah, that's so much better.
Transcripts of both inquiries, or 2 inquiries.
Now do you see the image? Still really blurry, right? I wonder if that was on purpose. I'm not going to accuse him of like foul play or something, because frankly I don't. But the fact that is a bit of low quality, I'm not. Especially when I can go on to Google and find one that's of that quality. It might just be the stream. I don't know. It's not. I think he made this in 2012. I think it was December 2012 or something, or in October 2012. Oh no, that's sorry. JP Morgan stuff. I can't remember when he did it. I think it was December 2012. But I might be right. I know it was in December, but I can't remember about. I think he did a book about it. Right. So what is so after this anything? Let's see what it says first. White Star Line propaganda, sure. Converting eyewitness accounts, yeah, obviously for different perspective. That's mostly if you're talking about the sinking, it's usually a problem of perspective, and it's also very dark, so you don't fully know the scene. And Titanic's wasn't well lit. A lot of lights would have probably just been from portholes and stuff like that. The boat deck wasn't well lit. There was like a handful of lights on the boat deck, usually around where the lifeboats were, but that was kind of it. Contemporary newspaper fiction. Well, the only ones that always kind of catches people out, I notice, is the ones where it says like Titanic sank, Titanic safe, news paper or towed to Halifax or something. So yeah, Titanic seems safe. So you can notice if I open up and go to it, you can see this is on the morning of April 15th. Whilst this is happening, whilst it's being written, what's it called? The recovery of and rescue of the passengers are still probably going on as it's being written. So they have no evidence for what they're saying. They've just probably heard that Titanic is damaged and hasn't been heard if it's gone. So they just made something up. And it's the same with, famously, there's one that says towed to Halifax. You can see when it gets to the 16th, you can see it's. So 16th, yeah, people have died. It's drowned. It's gone. So a lot of the 15th one is either gone, or it's been saved, or it's been towed to Halifax, or blah blah blah. I can't remember where. Disabled tip under tow after hitting iceberg. So yeah, the problem with this is that there was a ship in the North Atlantic that was towing another ship. It wasn't Titanic. Titanic was obviously sunk at the bottom of the ocean, but it was towing another ship. I believe it was towing I can't remember what it was. It might be an icebreaker ship. I don't think it was, but it might be a tanker ship. I can't remember. But it was called the Asia, or the Asia, or the Asian, or whatever. And it was towing a ship, and the ships around Titanic were saying, "Could you go help? Could you come help? I'm not this far and that far." And they contacted the Asian and said, "Could you help?" And he said, "I cannot. I am towing to Halifax." And the newspapers caught onto this and thought, "Oh, maybe they're towing Titanic." But no evidence of it. It's just the transcript says, or the telegraph says, the wireless telegraph says, "Towing. I am towing vessel," something. So how can it help? That's what they argued. So they couldn't help, and I don't think, and they were really south as well, so they're miles away. It was a bit pointless. But that's where the confusion comes in. By the time it gets to the 16th, newspapers realise that Titanic has sunk, and yeah, they basically say it's sunk, and they guess how many people there are because there were estimates, but they didn't fully know. We only really figured it out conclusively, I think, in the last decade or so, maybe last 2 decades, where 712 survived, but you can see from some of them they say like 868, but yeah. Anyway.
It's basically all those things. Can we all read that?
I'm just going to go straight to where the evidence is, but I can't, because I just want to go what he says, because you're going to talk about night to remember. So, right, saying this, finally.
I have to turn back the clock a little way, first of all. A guy by the name of J.P. Morgan, John Pierpont Morgan, who was a big American financier at the turn of the 20th century, from the 19th into the 20th century. Very close links to the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and all the usual suspects. Okay, he bought the British White Star Line, which was the line that eventually built the Titanic and the Olympic and the Britannic, the 3 sister ships. Okay, the British government, because it was a foreigner, they had to sanction the purchase. And they imposed certain conditions on that purchase, on that sale, which, please bear that point in mind, because that will become very important a little bit later on. Okay, there's Mr. Morgan himself. What a nice man.
What a moustache.
Okay, so in 1907, Morgan asked Harland and Wolff Shipyard, who almost exclusively built ships for the White Star Line, by the way, to build a new class of luxury liners, and he was going to call that the Olympic class. And work started, as it says there, in 1907 at Harland and Wolff Shipyard in Belfast. And it was going to be 3 ships. Firstly, the Olympic, closely followed by the Titanic and the Britannic, which came a little bit later.
This is not exactly true. JP Morgan was involved in the decision to build new ships, but it was actually a discussion between Ismay and William Perry, because White Star Line had always made ships with Harland Wolff. Well, not the early ships, but most of the ships were Harland Wolff. So Bruce Ismay, being the owner of the White Star Line, said, "I want to build some ships." I believe at start it was always Olympic and Titanic, and there was the possibility of the third if that went right, but there was no evidence that Britannic was to be built until, I believe, Olympic was successful. I can't remember exactly. I know someone I can ask, but I'm not going to fully know off the top of my head. But they had to go to Morgan to get financing to say, "This is what we want to do." Harland Wolff had agreed. Would we spare the money? And JP Morgan agrees, and then he gives the money to White Star Line to then give to Harland Wolff to then build the ships. So it wasn't that Morgan commissioned it; it was that Morgan was the financer from Ismay's commissioning, because it was Ismay and Perry who had the discussion, not Ismay and Morgan. And as I said, with the free, so work commencement, yeah, that's fine. Work commencement is free. So as I said, there isn't. I believe it's that 2 Olympic and Titanic were the only ones chosen to be built, and a third was proposed, but the third would only be made if the first 2 were considered, or if the first one was successful, then they'll make a second, which is why there's a few ships between Titanic and Olympic, or Titanic and Britannic, because Harland Wolff didn't make it, or didn't make the decision made to Britannic until Olympic was shown to be quite successful, and it was just a way to one up Cunard, as it were. Because if you had 3 observational ships, you can have Olympic and Titanic running off each other, alternating voyage east and westbound voyages, and then you can also have Oceanic 2, which didn't have a pair, wouldn't have a pair in that sense, and then Britannic can then orientate also get Oceanic 2 involved. So those 4 were working in tandem to do different voyages at a time. So when he says 3 ships, he's probably saying that they were, the possibility of 3 ships were made, but 2 ships were built, and then the 3rd was to be built if the first was successful. So yeah. And when it says virtually identical, they were built off the same plans. There are changes that were made to Titanic during construction, but I imagine we'll test on that later, so I'll move on from that.
Moving objects that had ever been built at that time. Olympic and Titanic would be virtually identical, but significantly there were some differences, and again we'll come on to that a little bit later as the story develops. Okay, so in 1910, this is where we swap over onto another little thread, which you're going to have to bear in mind as well.
So, I don't know too much about the whole origins of Federal Reserve. I know the links towards it to the Titanic, and I know stuff like that, so I can talk about that. I don't know. I know that people did meet on Jekyll Island. I know Morgan and Rothschild was part of that. I don't know how much secrecy there was. Obviously, it wasn't very good because we know about it. Federal Reserve Bank, that was just a central banking system that was desired in New York and such in America, and then powerful opposition. But we'll get to the powerful opposition when I imagine he'll talk about JP Morgan.
In 1910, what appears at first sight to be a totally unrelated incident, 7 extremely high-powered American financiers met in total secret at a place called Jekyll Island, which is off the coast of Georgia in the USA.
I mainly want to get to the switch stuff. I'm not too bothered about the Federal Reserve. Talk about the Federal Reserve when we get to it. Well, he's going to talk about the powerful interests. Let's see when he gets to the people. So, Benjamin Guggenheim.
Not from any benevolence of the masses, of the ordinary people, but only because it would seriously diminish their own fortunes. And this guy was one of them, Benjamin Guggenheim, you may recognise the name. The other guy was John Jacob Astor and Isidor Straus. Now,
I'm going to go on Guggenheim and Astor first. He mentioned the 3rd, but I don't, yeah, he showed it. So, Benjamin Guggenheim and John Jacob Astor, there is actually no evidence that was found that shows they were opposing it. So we don't believe that they were opposed to it, but they did give no public opinion. So if they did, it was pure secrecy and we wouldn't know. But it's likely that there weren't any actions that they showed in any of their businesses or any of their lifestyle that would oppose the Federal Reserve. They went on and did cruises and such, they went on and did banking options, but most of them weren't. They were just business owners. Like Strauss was the founder of Macy's and such, which was a department store, so it's not a banker and such, but he was a very rich man because Macy's was the biggest store in New York. So, and Astor and Guggenheim were just business owners in themselves. I don't believe they had a connection with bankers, but I'm not fully 100% sure. I can't fully remember, but I know they were businessmen and they had their own businesses. But based on the actions of any of their time through their businesses, none of it would have opposed the Federal Reserve, and none of it would have hindered the Federal Reserve. None of it would have been in conflict with its creation or anything like that. It was purely something that there's no evidence to support that they were against it, because there's no evidence to say that they did oppose it in the first place, because they never gave any public opinion. Now, people will say, oh, they could have believed it, but then on the other hand, they couldn't have believed it, because we don't know. There's just no evidence that they did oppose it through their actions or their comments. So we don't class that they were opposed to it, because they showed no signs that they were opposed to it. So, and if it comes to it, we probably would have found out by now that they would have been opposed to it, but still no evidence. It's believed that they didn't. And then he mentions
Now, neither of these were very.
Isidor Strauss. So he's going to say that Isidor Strauss was against the Federal Reserve, which is the first lie, as it were, because we have news articles, and I'll get the full article. It doesn't really show much, but it shows that this was in, I wrote it down, the 16th of October 1911. So this was whatever it was, 7 months before Titanic, but after that, and he says he urges a new banking plan, which is the Federal Reserve or the central bank, whatever. There's more things to it. You can have a little read if you like. So it's the same one, same like that. Calls for speedy action, and Citizens League represents the community. Isidor Strauss, who was recently elected treasurer of New York branch of the National Citizen League for the promotion of the sound banking system, replied yesterday of the attacks of James J. Hill, chairman of the Great Northern I can't read. Directorate, made last Thursday before the Illinois Bankers Association on the National Reserve Plan, which banking and currency reformers have been advocating. Mr. Hill said that the plan was not a good one because it was too liable to be controlled by sinister politicians or financial interests. In his statement, Mr. Strauss said that under our present currency system, we will always suffered from either a currency famine, as in 1907, or from a plethora of money as at the present time. Some agencies, some co-operating banking systems was needed at once. Under the proposed cooperative system, and said Mr. Strauss, all the national states and saving banks would cooperate and make the assets of every bank liquid by uniting the reserves and all the banks in the country and issuing banknotes against them. His statement says further. So this is more about Mr. Hill and whatever. So if you want to read it, I'll scroll down slowly. It'll be like a Star Wars title call. But this actually goes against that claim, and I can't remember where the claim starts with. I think it's like a 60s claim or something. They stated that these three men were against it when there's actually no evidence to suggest they did. There's no evidence for Guggenheim and Astor that they were against it, and we know from articles, and there's another one as well, but I don't have it saved. I need to get it, where it says that Strauss was actually in favour of the National Reserve, or the Federal Reserve. So that kind of goes against that, which is a problem because they use this argument so often to say that that these three men were there, and then JP Morgan ceded they were against it, and so sunk the Titanic to kill them, and so they wouldn't hinder it. But JP Morgan was in favour, and a very, very powerful man in New York, and Astor and Guggenheim saw no interest in competing against it, so they didn't even bother. Half the time they were in Europe anyway, because at the time of Titanic they were coming back from their honeymoon. For Astor and his wife Madeline, and Guggenheim I believe was on holiday with family, but I can't remember where they were. I think they were in France, maybe? I can't remember. Astor and Madeline were in Egypt, and they travelled across America to get to the transatlantic voyages, which was in France, and they got on from that point. I believe they came over on Olympic, actually. I can't remember.
From finance, it was industry, retail, leisure, but not finance, and that's very important. I'll just give you a moment to read that. I won't read it out myself.
It is well enough for people who do not understand our banking and money system, or if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning. Okay, it doesn't make any difference. So as I said, who was opposed? Why were they opposed? Freed of rich men. So yeah, yes, they were rich men. Neither of their power would undermine their personal fortunes. Well, obviously Strauss didn't, because he was for it, and Astor showed no action of doing anything. Extreme inflation. So I mainly want to get to the bottom ones because it's a major stakeholder in the Federal Reserve. Yeah, okay. Well, he died when it was made anyway, so it made no difference to him. It's a large shareholder in the International Mercantile Marine over the Californian, which I imagine will come to a point later on when it talks about Titanic sunk Titanic and blah blah blah. Also the Lusitania, another story for another time. So I don't think we're going on about that, but that's fine.
It was purely and it's done by private interests. Every note that comes into circulation, and this is true of our country today even, so the government
Still about the Federal Reserve. I just want to talk about Titanic.
the ships off the production line. So they
Sure.
overloaded the ships, they overinsured the ships, insurance scams were absolutely rife.
No.
They didn't care.
So I'm going to go many passages poor immigrants. Most of them came from Ireland and such, and a lot of stuff where they were usually poor in a country and they were going to America to start a new life because America was quite rich and they wanted to see if they can get more comfortable in Ireland, in places like that. So they wanted to go there. So it's basically overloaded. Not really. Ship like Titanic was capacity of I believe 3,450 odd people, and it was like a third full, whilst with normal bookings. But in Southampton, because there was a coal strike, more people got on Titanic because the ships under the IMM that were going across the Atlantic couldn't share the coal between them, so they gave all the coal under the IMM ships to Titanic along with its passengers, so these people can get to New York on time. And that seemed to be fine. You're basically getting an upgrade. You're going from the likes of the Philadelphia to the Titanic. You're obviously getting a massive upgrade, so no one really complained. So they weren't overloaded. A lot of them were actually underloaded. So overinsured ships, insurance scams comment. This is just not true. Titanic, for instance, was undervalued. So ships commonly weren't overinsured. They were either overvalued, the ship, but usually they would go through and run through costs to say, no, your ship is worth this, and they would have to go by them. The maximum a ship would have been to build and such, and usually a little bit more just to usually round it up to a nearer figure. So Olympic was valued at 7.5 million because that's how much it cost to build. Because Olympic was working so well, they actually undervalued Titanic to 5 million. So I've seen Olympic's thing before, but I don't know if I'm right. So here's it from when they got it from Liverpool. I believe it was on Liverpool. May have been. Anyway. It's for anyway. It's a Lloyd's thing. It's from Lloyd's. But you can see they value Titanic at 5 million, whilst Olympic was valued at 7.5, and it likely is costs that Olympic and Titanic did cost as much as Olympic, if not probably more, because the word changes added to Titanic. You can see when it's valid and such. So they're going for a year, and there's a lot of stuff like salvage and both and whatever. So this is her thing. So logically, if you're going to sink a ship, you would want to sink Olympic because you'd get a more comfortable amount of money because it's valued at more, so therefore you would get a larger return. So sinking Titanic is completely pointless, or as they would claim, a ship mast under the name Titanic, because you'd get less money for insurance because they undervalued it. So that doesn't make any sense on that side.
But it was mainly immigrants going to America, and
So industry noted for fraudulent practices. You'd have to show evidence for that.
they were just
Did he say anything about it?
Okay, and it was also an industry that was noted for fraudulent practices.
Right. You're gonna show? No. Okay.
So, moving on.
So the Olympic launched early 1911. No, it was launched on October 20th, 1910. The main voyage was the 14th of June. Yes, because I believe it arrived the 21st of June in New York, so yeah, that's fine. But obviously he's got the launch wrong because it launched October 20th, 1910. First impact, command sink. An American tug, almost yes. So a tugboat got quite close, to the rear end, and the propellers kind of sucked it in, and it kind of scraped the back a little bit. It didn't do any damage. The propellers were shut off quite quickly. So the tug survived, but it was a bit of a scary moment, and all that kind of happened was just a bit of paint came off. There was a few notable paint problems with Olympic, so they had to go and paint it a lot pretty much after every single voyage. September 11th involved a occasional Royal Navy cruiser, HMS Hawke. Yes, I can get the images for that if my thing wants to work. And damage far severe, more severe than first four. So this is one thing I'm going to talk about, is the Hawke collision, and why they say it, because it's got no evidence to support it.
And had its maiden voyage on the 14th of June.
You want to see what it says about the launch?
Pace. The first of the ships off the production line was the Olympic, which was to all intents and purposes identical to Titanic, and that was launched early 1911 and had its maiden voyage on the 14th of June.
I just said it. Yeah, so it wasn't. It was launched on October 20th, 1910. That's pretty basic. So okay.
As far as the Olympic was concerned, was that in September of that same year,
Okay.
as it was leaving Southampton Harbour, steaming down Southampton water to head out into the Channel, it was involved in a horrendous accident with a Royal Naval cruiser called HMS Hawke. Now that was never publicised, alright, it is available information, I'm not saying you couldn't find it out, but how many people knew that? Put your hands up, that actually happened. Okay, about 6 people, fine. Okay, so, yeah, very important point. Now the damage to Olympic was far more serious than they first thought. It limped back into Southampton Harbour for initial testing. There's HMS Hawke.
So when the collision did happen with Olympic, so actually I'll talk about this quickly. There's a lot of paint scuffs. This is all just the wake has scratched paint away. So anti-fan's quite fine, but this is just the paint's a bit thin, and they just, yeah, it's great fun. But you can kind of see these tugs. I don't believe that's anything. I think that's just something, I don't know what it is. It's probably one of them. So it's like one of these gets really close and almost touches. I believe Olympic has completely stopped here. You can see there's literally no wake happening. Obviously it's going quite slowly. But I think just a tug got quite short. You can see that it's probably that one, to be honest. I don't fully know. And you can see even that one, so it could be even that one. Anyway, we know there was a tug that did kind of get sucked into the back and did scrape off some paint. I don't believe it's this. There is, when the wake kind of happens, it kind of splashes mostly on here. Down, up, down, up. You can kind of see it's a pattern, and then when it gets to the stern, it's a bit more chocked, because that's where the propellers are causing all the sloshing of the water and everything. And then there's Olympic kind of waiting. And then some more images. And with the Lusitania, how cute. There was another incident, it did hit the pier. And you just have to note that this is, the bigger ship before this would have been the likes of Lusitania and Mauretania, and Olympic was 100 feet longer and even wider than that. So it was a very, very new thing to maneuver, and they weren't even fully comfortable with doing it. So a lot of, like, even there was even mishaps in Southampton, but it was a little bit more well executed in Southampton because they deal with ships so often that they're very comfortable with it, whilst with New York it's not as frequent. They were frequent, but not too much. But yeah, and then Olympic coming back. This is maiden voyage. You can see very, very pretty image of her in New York. And then when she was there. So I'll let him talk about the HMS Hawke and Olympic.
That was almost a write-off as well. But Olympic went back to Southampton, and they did the initial damage assessment, and they found a huge hole. And by huge hole, I mean a huge hole. You'll see a picture of it in a minute. But even worse than that, there was all sorts of unseen damage as well. There were bent and broken beams, metal beams. There were thousands, hundreds of thousands of rivets that popped. Steel plates were completely ripped away. It was a mess. It was a mess.
So I'm going to go through these points quickly before he goes on. Huge holes above and below the waterline. So let me get the image of the hull where it shows both of them. Because I won't show the Southampton one. I'll show the Southampton ones, but I want to get the actual images that shows all the damage. I can't find it. Might be this one. Sort of. Oh well, I'll just go to one side. There's a massive hole here. This is where the like main bit, because HMS Hawks was a ramming ship, it would just go in and basically try to slice through, but Olympic was incredibly strong, so it didn't go actually that far, ironically. And then there was a bit more damage here. There was also damage to propeller, but I believe that is either that the Hawk kind of came over so it chipped, or because it's kind of there's vibration, so it's just breaking stuff off because it's brittle or something. You can see it's kind of been scratched. I was like, yeah, it's old. But you can kind of see there's a gash here, a little bit of it hole, but you can, so gash here, buckled in area, but it's not been pierced, and then gash here, and then there's a puncture here. I go to my model, go into a one or something. You can see, if I can see which one, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. So the hole is about here. So the gash is about here, and then there's a little one here, and then a teeny one here. Which could be, I believe it was probably just, it's come out and it's just slammed down or something on it. It's definitely Hawk damage, but the damage is here, and I'll see what points he makes again. Also, steel frames buckled, obviously. Buckled into steel. They even show it, like here. So this is the inside. I believe this is the, probably the lower one. No, this will be the upper one actually. So that's this hole here. Is this image. It did go through marble decks, but the decks have kind of holes. So you can see the beams crushed here, but it's all right here. Even the light bulb survived. 1000 pop overs, obviously steel plates are gone. Steel plates and beams bent, sorted, and have broken across 4 decks. Sure. I'll show an image of when it's Southampton. So it came in from the rear and it's got sucked in and it's just gone into the back. It's pushed in and moved these plates back and over. So and you can see how it's kind of like it's been scraped along to when it came out. So it came out and it's been bobbing about, scraped along. So you can see it's been pushed in, comes out quite low, which is probably how it causes damage on the propeller wing, and then it comes up.
It was a mess. It was a mess. There we are.
And that's the bottom damage there, which is.
And that was
I have the image.
the main bit of the damage, but it stretched. It had an impact.
Yeah, that's this
almost
image.
1/3 of the ship.
Yeah. There's also this image. No, it's. With this image, but you can see it's kind of. It's quite tall, but it goes into one of the areas. The main keeled crossing. So this is something I want to seriously address, which is one of the main points, because this is the beginning of the idea of the switch happening. So I'm going to go back. Temporary patch took 2 weeks. The temporary patch was this wooden patch. It goes. The reason it took 2 weeks was this was done quite quickly. They just put rivets. They just put blocks in where rivets had popped and put it there, so it can at least not get a load of water swamped through. But the problem is, the longer it took so long, because they had to get divers at the bottom to try and fill in some of the bottom bit. They didn't, I don't think they got to the propellers, but they noticed that there was a damage to the shaft, the propeller shaft. So they didn't use the propellers to get back. I believe Olympic was completely towed back to Belfast, but that's the patchwork it means, and most of it was because they needed to go under the water to try and drain out some of the water. Then back to Drydock, ultimate full damage assessment. So it got to it happened in September 20th, yes, and it got to Belfast early October. I don't remember the exact date. It might have been the 2nd or the 4th or something like that. Or it might have been the 7th. Either way, it got there in the first week of October. But the major problems they say is the bent and twisted keel and Jurassic lift support. So one thing that you can highlight just by looking at the damage is you see it hasn't gone that deep. Even if you look at the images of, you can see it's gone in here and it hasn't even punctured these two streaks. Because if you look at the angle of the Hawk, which I'll see if I do have an image of the Hawk, it's got a kind of bananaed front bow because it's supposed to pierce mostly at the bottom and at the top. But due to the curvature of the hull here, it's done more damage to the top. And it's likely that the top bit actually probably saved it a bit more. So we kind of see it there. And all of this imagery is on, believe something, I can't remember what it's called, but it was on like a French site. I do have images of the Hawk, do I not? I do. This was the bow when it came out, so it's had sole collision, it's buckled in. When you look at images like this, it looks incredibly worse, but amazingly they actually repaired the Hawk and it was fine when it got back. Whoops. And it was going to be fine. So this is a Hawk. You can see the bow here. You can see it's kind of a bit pointed at the top and then mostly pointed sharp at the bottom. And that's a very good close-up of it. So this is the damage and it's really buckled in the top. Due to, you can kind of see the angle of the hull anyway. So it's a really good image, that one. And then you can see like an illustration. It's not correct, the Hawk would be the other way because it's gone in. Hawk is trying to overtake Olympic, and then as it's overtaking, the propellers from Olympic have caused suction and pulled the Hawk in, which is why they deemed Titanic or Olympic the one at fault. And then the final bit is, just by looking at the damage, you can see it's not gone in that heavy. As I said, there's a massive gap, there's a massive hole here, which is the main damage, and then a few streaks that aren't damaged, and then this gap here, and then a little bit of damage here, and then there's also a little bit there. So if this has caused the keel to be bent, and yet the damage is only here, how has it caused damage down here? The plates underneath haven't pushed it, nothing above it has been pushed, nothing connecting it has been pushed, the keel is the strongest part of the ship. How would the keel have been damaged? It's just not possible. And also they said it was because of a port list. If the keel had been bent, it would be bent over to the side and you'd see a Jurassic port list. But if you actually look at Olympic, after the collision, you can see it's actually got pretty much an even keel. Probably because it's equalized. But there's maybe a starboard list a little bit, but there's not much of a list. You can quite clearly see that. But they're going to cite images like even if you look at here, you can see there's the damage here. There's no damage to where the keel is. And if there was damage to the keel, they wouldn't want to lie the keel on the blocks. And they're very good. They know how ships move and everything, so they are fine with that. So they wouldn't want the keel to be lied on because it's not a stable part of the ship. And putting in a dry dock with a damaged keel is not a good idea anyway.
Twisted the keel of the Olympic, and this was causing a huge list of port. It was quite dramatic.
So huge list of port. Here's a more centre side. Where is this huge list of port? It's not there. There was no huge list of port. You can even see in here, this has the damage. It is listed. I've actually got the date right. There's no port list of anything. Because the keel wouldn't have been damaged, because it just wouldn't have been touched. So
actually, but we'll
obviously
get that
that's
information
fine.
in a little while. Even the temporary patches to get it back to Belfast, because bearing in mind in those days this was the biggest ship that had ever been built in the world. The only place where there was a dry dock big enough for it was at Belfast.
Let's go through. Right, so the inquiry. All accidents to Royal Navy ships subject to inquiry. Yes, that's fine. Fully culpable and denied claim. And White Star liable for damage of both ships. So the reason that White Star didn't get the claim, even though it was justifiable, the Hawk got too close and had got sucked in. But because obviously they don't really know that, they're not going to anticipate it because it's a new ship and it's quite big. So the reason Titanic or Olympic didn't get its insurance claim from it was because when a naval vessel is under investigation, they don't put the blame on the naval vessel, but they deemed it as Olympic's fault because Olympic was the one who caused the Hawk to veer off course. So they deemed it as Olympic's fault because of that. But their argument was that the Hawk had got too close and therefore stuff like that. So I don't think I have. You can see some of the patchwork they were doing. You can see all the scraping. But you see these straights are not there. So it's obviously not gone really deep to damage the keel. But anyway, moving on from the keel, it's obviously not done keel damage. There's actually no documents to say it's done keel damage either. So that's that. So when they say there was... What was I going on about? Oh, what a claim. So Olympic was deemed a fault because it was believed to be because the suction causes the hull to go on off course, it was to blame for that. But there is usually Royal Navy bias, because they don't think that naval ships will have a fault. But you could argue it both ways. They just deemed that Olympic was at fault, and anyway of that.
Any accident involving a Royal Navy ship, there has to be an inquiry, and that inquiry will be was at the Olympic.
So irreparable? No. There is this image. This is the repairs. You can see rivet plates have been added where rivets are to be placed. A lot of measurements and get the frames right and etc. etc. This would have been the lower hull, and you can see at the bottom one as well, where they are also changing the propeller shaft, which is the shaft that runs down here. It was in sections, so they could have done it. They would have taken the propellers off, the propeller bossings off, and they wouldn't need the blades anyway. But you can see this is one side, and the hull would have been roughly around here. And you can see the repairs. Some of this have been added. They kind of just going up. Seeing some nice images of it as repaired, but Olympic was repaired. So when it says irreparable, it was repairable. Two options: patch, scrap, or patch up. So patch up took 7 weeks, which is about, I believe it was about 40 to 45 days it took to patch up, because of when they need to investigate it, because they can fully do it whilst it's in dry dock. And yeah, replacing plate took a third of length. That's not true. So a third of length, this is from, I don't know, for P31, which is, I could probably find it to be honest. P31, good, amazing. So P31 is here, and the image goes 30, however long. Probably up until this image, or maybe even this one, just peeking a little bit. So it just got this area sorted. It didn't do a third of the ship. The third of the ship would literally be from like here to here. That's too much. They wouldn't have done that. They would have done the plates for the damage and maybe the plates just surrounding the circumference of the damage. And there's also no evidence that they did a third of the length, so of that, and I bet he won't show it. One thing I noticed about his presentation is that he's just making claims. He's not actually showing photographic evidence, he's just making claims. So steel struts to brace the keel. That's not true, the keel wasn't touched, as we've established. Bold starboard propellers from Titanic, which is another point to say. So I can see Olympic's propellers there. Titanic's propellers wouldn't have been casted by now. They would have likely have been beginning casting in December. And Olympic left Belfast in November. And usually they cast the center propellers and then the side props, because the side props are a bit more finicky. But the only image we have believed to be of Titanic is propellers. We do have images of her propellers, but not center one is really loose. Well, we have a picture of her bossings, I believe, but I don't think we have one of her center, but I have to check that. Unless I'm thinking of one image, but I'm thinking it might be Olympic actually. Because I know it shows a central propeller, but it's not that good. Because there is a picture of her in dry dock. Right. There we go. And it shows this is the central propeller, which is very clearly a central propeller. Top here where the cone goes on, and bottom and here and whatever. So this is a blade, and it's believed to be a blade behind there. This, I have no idea what this is. It could be a blade, but I couldn't say. It's too low to be a blade anyway, if it is, so it's not a blade. So this is a blade, and it's believed to be one on the other side. If you would see a blade on each side, you'd probably see it peeking out here. So it's believed to be that this little here may be a part of the blade. But I can't say for sure. I haven't tested it, but I know this is the center propeller for Titanic. That's the only thing we have of Titanic. It's the central propeller of Titanic. That's it. The only image we have of it. You can see for later, parts of Titanic isn't painted. It's not painted. The front has been painted, and parts of the back have been painted. It's straight and whatever. The Titanic hasn't been painted for probably since launch, effectively. And when she's in dry dock, they finally decided to fully paint her, just to give her updated paintings. So this image of Titanic was in February. I believe it was mid-February or late February. So, and Titanic's Olympic's propellers were photographed in late March 1911, and they were installed in April. And as we know, because the propellers are usually really hard to kind of get right, it's believed they casted and molded them usually quite late at the last minute when they finalized everything. And it's believed that Titanic was finished at about December, early January, and then they finally got them on in mid-February. So Titanic's, and usually they do propellers near the end anyway, because they wouldn't have been able to put it on Titanic because they're going to do it in dry dock, and they're going to do dry dock at the latest point because it takes forever to get drain the water and put water back. But anyway, the propellers would not have been ready by October or November 1912. So when it says borrowed, what it really means is stolen, but there's actually no evidence that Titanic or Olympic took any of Titanic's blades. It's just simply not. Until maybe later on, but that's the only evidence there is. But I'll go through.
Absolutely irreparable because of the twisted keel, mainly. I don't know any of you seafaring people, but the twisted keel on a ship is pretty serious. So they got basically two options: scrap it, which would have definitely meant the end of the line for not only White Star but Holland and Wolff as well. Who, if you remember, I said they almost solely built ships for White just by really.
I just want to get to the conversation point. So, January 1912, another collision. I don't believe there was a collision. I believe it just happened randomly in the Atlantic. Loss of propeller blade. Limb to Southampton. Severe vibrational damage. Enormous stress on already damaged ship. So there was reports of lots of vibration from the propeller blade, and usually when they throw a propeller blade, they are quite quick to do it because the vibration can be felt through a lot of the ship. It usually isn't a massive, like, I'm going to shake myself to pieces, but it is quite a nasty thing, and usually you feel imbalance in how the ship's moving. but it's like unlikely that it did any serious damage. Zero damage, normal stress on the already damaged ship. The damaged ship that was repaired, as we know. Back to Belfast again. Propeller replacement should have taken a few hours, but actually took 4 days. Now, I want to address this, because I have images of Olympic and Titanic in this moment. Why did it take 4 days? So, it may have taken even longer actually. So, Olympic arrived in Southampton in February when was it? It was like early March or something. It was early March. I think it was March 1st Olympic arrived, or it might have been February 30th. I can't, or 28th, sorry. And at this point, Titanic is in dry dock and getting painted and stuff, so they're not going to get Titanic out and be idle whilst they wait for Olympic to arrive. So what they did was they waited for Olympic to arrive. So you can see this is Titanic being pulled out of the dry dock, and this is Olympic just on standby. There's also another image. You can see Titanic is in dry dock and it's just been moved, and Olympic is kind of on standby. So the dry dock's here and they've kind of all been moved over because it's a bit awkward. And then that's Titanic. There is one image that I try and find. It's February. Let's show them both. So this is when Olympic was in dry dock. This was afterwards. So Titanic was pulled out of dry dock. As you can see here, you can see Olympic's on standby and Titanic's been moved. So Titanic was in dry dock when Olympic arrived, and it takes pretty much exactly 24 hours to drain the water from the dry dock and to lift and get the ship out. It took usually 24 hours to fill the dry dock and safely, because they've got a ship in there, they don't want it to move about. 24 hours to get it out and 24 hours to get it settled and drained. So it took a day. So Olympic arrives and it's waiting because now they're like, oh, Olympic's here, we're doing a swap. So finish all your work you're doing, get everything out, all the equipment and everything, we're going to fill the dry dock. So they start filling it and then they get Titanic out. As we know, Titanic was in it. So Titanic is in dry dock. Olympic here on the left is on standby, and when they get Titanic out, then they have to move Olympic in. So you can see it's them kind of waiting. And if I go to, but the image is not ordered. And this is when they're getting, so Titanic has been shuffled, Olympic has been moved to the right to get out of spot, and Titanic has been moved over. And then on the second, this is all on the second. So Olympic arrives on the first. I'm going to say the first, I believe it's the first. It's the date that comes to mind. And then they have to drain the dock. The next day, dock is finally drained, and Titanic is now moved out. They moved the caisson, move it out. Olympic's then moved to the left alongside Titanic, and Titanic is moved behind Olympic to get Titanic into where the wharf is. So it's alongside and away and out of the way, and dock, you can see it's moored here. And now the tugs are bringing Olympic into dry dock. So there's some like progress images that they're pulling the bow, get the bow in, and finally in dry dock. And that's after. So these three images are from the second, whilst this image is probably the day before. I believe I need to label them properly, but all these images are before. This is the famous one that everyone shows. This is Titanic on the right, and this is Olympic on the left. It means it's sadly being seen. The changes. You see Olympic? No, sadly not. Anyway, you can see by the bridge wings. Anyway, I'll get onto the change differences later. So Titanic has been moved and Olympic's going in dry dock. So April 1st it arrives. April 2nd it goes in the dry dock. And then they have to drain it. Draining takes a day. April 3rd they can actually work on the ship. And they get the new propeller blade in. new propeller blades off on the 3rd. Done. Sorted. Propeller is on, and they're going to now fill it then. So they need to get into the next day. And then it takes to do that. Get to the 4th. Then you get it shuffled out. And then they're going to do testing on Olympic to make sure it's fine. And all repairs are right. But they're going to get Titanic in first, so the work can continue on there. That takes a day. Titanic is then moved back in, and the day next day is ready, so it's the 5th. 5th, they do a bit of testing on Olympic and bring it back. They do a final result to make sure it's fine, and they send her back out on the 6th or the 7th. So it actually took more days, it took a week. So this you can see, this is Titanic here, and this is Olympic being moved so it can now leave. See, the Titanic is being moved in, or probably moved out, I can't remember exactly. But the Titanic on 8th and it's moved out. So they just may have finished the work on Titanic and whatever. Here's Olympic, Titanic's in dry dock. They're getting everything sorted. So Olympic gets to Belfast. It takes a day to get Titanic out. They get the dry dock drained. They get it drained the next day, and it comes out. So on the 3rd, sorry, 1st Olympic arrives. Get the work sorted. They probably drain it on the 2nd. Draining takes a day. They get it on, or they're doing it on the 1st, and they get Olympic in on the 2nd. Olympic is in there for a day or two, and then they take her out. That takes another day, so it's then the 5th or the 6th. Then Olympic gets testing to make sure the propeller's working, and then she gets it certified to make sure she's alright, and Harlan Wolff are happy, and then they send her back on her way. See? And then Olympic's gone, and this is Titanic on the 8th. I probably got my labels wrong, but oh well. Anyway. I'm just thinking. So it takes 6-7 days to get Olympic's propeller, because the problem is it would have been 2 days if Titanic wasn't in dry dock, but they had to do a shuffle because of all that. So let's see what he says.
When it got back into service in January 1912, and it lost a propeller blade, it had to get back to Southampton, and we know that there was severe vibrational damage, which obviously didn't help the cause at all, and it created enormous stress on what was an already badly damaged ship, even though it had been patched up. So back we go to Belfast again, propeller blade replacement. Now it's interesting this, because according to Harlan and Wolff records, a propeller blade usually took about 5 hours to replace. It was just a case of unscrewing bolts, big bolts, I grant you, but just a case of unscrewing bolts, and with a team of a few men, that could have been accomplished in 5 hours. It actually took 4 days.
So he's making it sound like something suspicious happened, because it should have happened in 5 hours, but it actually happened in 4 days. So something must have happened in that time. It happened because they had to get Titanic out and put Olympic in, and it takes a day to drain and fill the dry dock. So there's a lot of shuffling to go along, and it's hard. That's why Titanic is just not on the side; it's in the dry dock. You can see it earlier, but anyway, Titanic is in dry dock. This is when later on or before. Anyway, Titanic is in dry dock, and they need to get it out and then put Olympic in, but that takes a day in itself, so they can't do it in a few hours. So even by Stanley saying, he doesn't fully show the truth in what happened during those moments. Titanic had to be taken out, Olympic put in, and then Olympic taken out, Titanic then put back in, and then Olympic then got some testing, made sure everything was right, and then went back to service. That took a few days, mostly because how long it took to get the dry dock filled and drained, and the shuffling and everything. So he's kind of warping this a little bit to make it sound more suspicious than it actually is.
Dry dock for 4 days, having that propeller blade changed, which is a little bit strange, but we'll level at that for now. Okay. So what were they doing for 4 days? Well, strangely enough, Olympic had been launched by this time, although it wasn't finished. It was sat there in the water. And they were photographed together several times in Belfast around this time. Don't forget, this is like 3 months before Titanic's maiden voyage, and they were together.
I've noticed something. He's making this sound like, so he's saying January 2012, when I believe it was the end of January. It was in the middle of a eastbound voyage, so leaving from New York to Southampton, and it takes a week to get from there, and you're working on barely any steam. You're probably working on the central propeller only, so you're probably limited to only, it was probably only limited to like 6 or 7 knots at most. So it's going to get there really slowly, and I believe it takes 2 more extra weeks, maybe even 3. I think it's 2.5 or 3. I can't remember exactly, for it to actually get to Southampton, and then it needs to be processing. It needs to take a day to get everyone off and sort of that, and to get a plan in to get it to Southampton or to Belfast. So the images he's showing, he's saying that this will happen in January, if it is actually not true. But most of it actually happened in early March, and I believe it also happened in, I don't know if it happened in 27th or whatever. It also took a lot of time to get Olympic from the bottom of England to basically the top of Ireland. That took a week in itself, I believe, as well. So it's taken a long time from Olympic to get to where it's lost the propeller blade on the west side of the Atlantic, to get to the east side of the Atlantic and then get Southampton, have all the servicing sorted, and then move it from Southampton to Belfast. And that took a while in itself. Probably even took 5 weeks, possibly. I'd have to look exactly again, but when Olympic finally got there, it was early March. As we noticed, it got there about March 1st. When Titanic was still in Belfast. And it could be possible that they just finished to work on the Titanic and that's why they waited. But I think they had most of it sorted, but I can't remember if it went back in or not. Via the images and the labelling I have saying it's the signals, it seems like they did put Titanic back in dry dock. They probably had still some work to do. They obviously needed to paint Titanic, but they seem to have done that outside. But anyway.
Originally the Titanic was meant to be going out on the 20th of March, but that was put back to the 10th of April, partly because of all the contretemps with Olympic. And there they both are, the 2 sisters sat together, almost identical, almost. Let's look at the differences, okay? On the forward part of C deck, which is, I can't explain what it is. Olympic had 16 portholes unevenly spaced, and Titanic only had 14. So if you see pictures of the 2 together, it's easy to tell which one's which. Okay. And on the after part of E deck, Olympic's was open, and they decided to enclose Titanic for whatever reason, best known to themselves.
Right, so I'm going to go through the changes he mentioned. So can you tell the difference? So that is, I'll clear some of these images. Get the image of Titanic. The famous one, this one. Zoom a little bit. This one's Titanic, this one's Olympic. Olympic's going in dry dock. Titanic's been moved out of the way just so it can, Olympic can be moved in. So that's the image. Can you tell the difference? Now, this is where I emphasize with people who say that they were switched, because if you actually looked at both of them, to anyone, you would not tell the difference. They both have 4 funnels, they both have the same shape, they both have the mast and the crow's nest is there, the bridge is the same and whatever. When you actually look at the differences, you will notice, when you actually look at them both very closely, you'll see differences. And I can't really see some of them because half of the side's missing here, but see if I can get it from this image is probably a good one to show you for differences. Even though Titanic's a bit blurry, I'll go to the other image so you can see Titanic a bit clearer. So what did he say? Adding me myself, apologies. So forward part of C deck, Titanic had Olympic had 16 portholes, and Titanic had 14. So if I go to this image, you can't really see it, but on Olympic, this Olympic, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and you can't really see it. But the main bit is the end bit. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. That's the main bit that will be mentioned. On Titanic, on the other ship, you can't really see it perfectly, but you can see just about 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. And this seems to be a blodge, but it's there. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. So this is what they're talking about, these portholes. I will see. So this is again, this is beautiful. This is Titanic, you can say it's because it's not fully painted. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. And you count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So Titanic has 16 portals on the port side. And if I go to Olympic, can't really see it there, but you can see the rear is the same. Can't see it there, it's too blurry, sadly. Can't see it there either. Go. You sort of see it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So they both have 16 portholes. And if they don't, I don't know if he shows images. I don't suspect so. Oh, he does. But I'll see what image he shows. So he says, so he's wrong about that. Both ships have 16 portholes on the side that he's talking about. And I know he's going to be talking about the port side. But I want to make a note, and I will give the launch images for this. And I even use this one. And you kind of got the things the wrong way. That's Olympic, okay. My brain just broke for a moment. If I go to images of when she was launched, go to a famous one or something. So this is one of the famous ones. And look, this is Titanic. Titanic was launched in black, obviously. You can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 14 portholes. And yet, in the image we see of both of them, they both have 16. So 2 have been additionally cut to the rear. I'll go over why in a moment. If I go to Olympic, I need to get its things. I can't remember what it's called. The launch, that's the word I was looking for. Come on. This one work? Not really. I want to see one that's done enough steam because it's bloody things all the time. Okay, here you go. Olympic. Obviously, this Olympic is white. Launched white. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Ah, so they both had 14 on the side. You can see Olympic name there as well. And just to prove that it is Olympic, because I know I had one discussion with someone on X about it. Here is it being launched. It's obviously Olympic. Yeah, we know, everyone knows Olympic was painted white when it launched. And there's part of the film when they did it. So yeah, Olympic was white, and via Titanic's launch, it was launched in black because of service, and it didn't bother helping the newspapers because not many people would have gone photographing it because all the photographs of Olympic's launch was good enough. So you can see that they both had 14 portholes at the start, but as we said earlier, both of them, Olympic had 16 portholes and Titanic had 16 portholes. If I even go back to February in Titanic, you can see the 16 portholes here. How do you add new portholes, and also why? Adding new portholes is not hard. So it would have been this one. So these 2 portholes, you can see they're kind of roughly etched into. They probably only been added recently. Portals aren't hard to add. You just add a bit of scaffolding, put a man over, and you get something called, you just get a pneumatic cutter, and that's how they did it. They never cut them in the plating prepares, valves mainly for rivets and such and shaping. They always riveted in the plate, and then when it was on the ship, they then cut the holes. I have a picture of it being cut, not on Olympic, on Titanic, on other ships, so I think we'll find out later, but they both had 16 portals, so we'll see what it is. Aft part of E deck, which really confuses me because I'll give the benefit of doubt. I think he means A deck, which is the deck up here. So if I go to the image of both of them, side by side, you can see this deck has got beams, of course, or frames. So it's open, and for Titanic it's open as well. And you can actually see the scaffolding here. It's actually a better image, I think. Yeah, so here's this Titanic coming out. You can see the side scaffolding of where the pedestals are for the people to... Well, that's an even better image. You can see the scaffolding here for them to install the plating for the enclosed promenade. There's obviously Titanic, paint gone, poop shoots. So I believe you're talking about that. But if you're talking about the aft part, he says, what did he say? Which one did he say was closed? Olympic was open, Titanic was enclosed. I imagine he's referring to this part of B deck, which is just, I believe it's a second class promenade, and an Olympic was quite large, because this, well, actually no, it wasn't a second class promenade, it was a first class enclosed promenade. But on Titanic, as you can see here, it's quite shorter. So why did they make these changes for the enclosed promenade and the aft bit? When Olympic was in service, they realised that a lot of people were using the enclosed promenade, but not the main promenade. It's possible because there was too much spray or whatever, but most people were using the enclosed promenade. So on B deck, the one with the windows, and then it was here. So what they thought on Titanic was, no one's using them on the Titanic, no one's going to use them on Olympic, and people are probably not going to use them on Titanic either. So what we're going to do is on B deck, we'll remove a lot of B deck and get rid of the promenade and put in cabins. And staterooms and such like that, which is what they did. You can see the change in plating from like the windows primarily is the main place. And then there's also that the rear end was closed off as well. A little bit was still a bit of a promenade, but most of the stuff from here is just added cabins. On the rear end, this is the starboard side, they widened the, what's it called? A la carte restaurant, which is on B deck. On Olympics, it was just the same width on each side and then the promenades on each side. With the a la carte restaurant, they added it and extended it to the port side. And on the other side for Titanic, they added the Cafe Parisien. Amazingly, a lot of people actually don't realise that Olympic didn't have a Cafe Parisien until after Titanic sunk. It got it during its refit. And it was added to Britannic as well, because it was a very popular thing on Titanic, because it was noted, even though Titanic only had one voyage, it was noted to be very popular, so they added it on Olympic. So that was all sorted, and that was all done, and that's why they did it. And then they moved, we'll see later on in March or whatever, so let's see, you can see that the A deck area has half of it been enclosed and half of it been kept open. This was just to give preference so people can do what they like. And you can see a bit of those changes better here. So you can see the cabins, this would have been a cabin, this would have been cabin, this would have been a cabin, and yeah, each window would have been in its own stateroom. And then here is where the a la carte restaurant is. These ones and this would have been part of the restaurant, I believe, or the galley, I think, I can't exactly. But these parts would have been there. And then on the other side is the Cafe Parisien, which is here. So that's why they changed it. So when he says E deck, I think he means B deck. But there you go. We can't sadly see this area on topic because it's been mangled from the breakup and the collision at the bottom. So going back to this, he has, and I think he means B deck with this, but he's been shown that that's wrong and it's a wrong thing. So, did the White Star Line switch to 2 ships? Decisions were taken shortly after Thailand's completion. Hand-picked groups over 1 weekend, bribery and threats. So, this, I assume, is the Guarantee group, which has got like Andrews, Thomas Andrews, and Barty Crouch. Not Barty Crouch. I can't remember his name. There was a group of 8 people who built the Titanic, who were given the opportunity to operate on the Titanic, and they were called the Guarantee Group, and they would have known the ships very well and been like the main guy to go to, the main advisors as it were. Some of were in the engine room, boilers, and just about stewardessing and stuff like that. Mostly in the machinery though. So handpicked group over 1 weekend. So that was just a nice thing. If there's bribery and threats, there's no indication of that. There is literally no evidence of that at all. So simple procedure, minor changes, carpet, nameplates, more of this later, lifebelts and lifeboats. So this is what I believe you're talking about, how you can change it. So the minor changes, carpet, etc. The carpet is very hard to rip out. You'd have to rip it out and put it back in and hope that you don't damage it. Which is very likely to happen. Nameplates, he'll go on that later, so I'll talk about it later. Lifebelts and lifeboats. But there's also, as we noticed, between the 2 ships, that he's not talking about all the changes between them. So, they would need to move the cabins from B deck onto Olympic. They will need to extend the a la carte restaurant onto Olympic. They will need to add a Cafe Parisien onto Olympic. They would eventually need to enclose the promenade on A deck on Olympic, because they've already got the scaffolding to do it. They would need to change layouts, a lot of the layouts. Most famously, the Turkish bath. Titanic and Olympic had different layouts of the Turkish bath. See if I got an image of Olympic's Turkish bath. I'm pretty sure I do. If I don't, I'll go to some plans. But Olympic has a different layout of Turkish bath than Titanic. They were in the same area, but their construction was different. So this is an image of the Turkish bath. Wide angle. It doesn't want me to go over. And meta better image. So this is 1911. This is of Olympic's Turkish bath. And it was it was a different design as seen on Titanic. I think I have an image. I think there was an image of Titanic's Turkish bath, but I can't remember exactly. There is a wreck image like this one, which is mainly of the cooling room, but what they've noticed is that on the wreck, this is Titanic's Turkish bath. So just putting them side by side, you can tell they're not laid out correct the same. These windows here are like portals, and I think these went into the other room. I can't exactly remember. I'm trying to remember where things are, the orientation. I'm going to get a plan. Let me get a original Olympic plan so I can get my orientation correctly so I'm not saying wrong things. Oh, my files are not ordered correctly. Original plans, general arrangement. Sure. So this is rooms area we've been talking about. Turkish Spartan cooling room. So this is this one. I did switch, there was one with beams and such. I'm trying to get my orientation. Where am I? There I am. I can remember, I believe he stood in this area, and because these are portholes. So he's looking to the starboard wall of the hull, where the portal came in. You can see it there. If I go to a Titanic plan, you can see it's been completely overhauled. This is the area, there's a cabinet here, and there's a cabinet here. If you look at Olympics, no cabinets, no nothing. It's been completely changed, been extended, stuff like that. It's completely different on Titanic. If you look on Titanic, this one, you will see here these cabinets, which are the dressing rooms. Then lights here. These walls have no lights in, so they don't go to the end of the wall, because there's no lights in there. So you need to rely on these lights because no porthole lights. Now you can say it was in the dark, but it's obviously that. You can see these cabinets, and this is definitely Titanic, but it's not this. This is definitely Olympic. And it's in a cooling room, and then there's a gap when James Cameron came in. I believe, I can't remember which way they came in. I believe they came from this door here, and then he's in here. So do I have the image of the deal? I do not. So that's completely different layout-wise, and I could probably go to the of it on the rec. I go to the Turkish bath image. Here is Titanic's Turkish bath. You can see this decor, which is this wall here. Can't see this alley, but then you can see this area here. This is where this cabinet is. There would be none of this on this because it was a larger room, and well, it wasn't a larger room, but well, actually, was it a larger room? Oh well. But it's completely different to here. Orientation completely different, and it matches what a wreck is. I don't know if I have many other images of the wreck. Buttons. Really wanted one of the dressing table. I'm trying to get images I just taken from like James Cameron screenshots. Help me. Coat rack. Yeah, there's even footage of it. Long video. So this is from Titanic Archives. This is when they go in and see cooling room. This is looking at the windows here. And this door, I can't remember. Do I have to picture it? Why do I keep closing the picture? So that is this area here. And there's looking, you can see the vessel. I think it's called like a Vestelar player or something. I'm going to pronounce it wrong. It's this bit here we're looking at. I want them to go left. Ah, there you go. So you can see the cabinets. Just about. Can't bugger me. Just go left. Please, James Cameron. Go left. Go left. You can actually see them in the decoration too. Cool. He's going right. Anyway, you can see it from the layout. That's so indirect. Obviously, it does not match the layout of Olympics room, which in itself completely destroys the Switch argument because the Turkish baths match Olympic but not Titanic. Well, I screwed myself there. They're going to be clipping that and they're going to get it all misconstrued. And the Turkish bath on the wreck matches Titanic and not Olympic. There you go. But knowing the Switch conspiracists, they will take that previous clip and say that, oh, I omitted it. There's blah 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 blah. Oh well, I'll deal with that later.
Switch them.
I took a big tangent there.
You probably guessed by now, with a view to sinking what would.
And also to note, you have to change every single thing that says 400 and 401 on the ships, and also some plating differences, which I'll point out probably when he talks about the nameplate. It's going to go through. I know I'm skipping through it. If you want to watch it, by all means watch it. I'm mostly focused on the points he makes. So here's Titanic at launch. You can see the bridge isn't even there. He is looking at this image. You can see bridge isn't there. Yeah, it's not this image, but it's of this one. I want to find the exact image because I'm too picky about it. Okay, it doesn't matter. Anyway, you can see they are the same image. You can see bridge is missing. There's a hole in the bloody thing here. This is Titanic at launch, and he counts it. 14 portholes. So he's counted Titanic at launch. Titanic was maiden voyage in 16 portholes. However, Olympic at its launch had 14 portholes. And then it had 16 later on. There's actually images of Olympic. If I go to an image of Olympic from fitting out, at the end of its fitting out, shall I say. It's Olympic at the end of the fitting out. Can't really see it, I'm not going to bother the name. It's Olympic after fitting out, you can tell. Done. All of it shows Olympic. And what can you notice? 14 portholes. So this is Olympic, and it had 14 portholes when it left. I don't think I have images that show the starboard side of Olympic during maiden voyage. Really annoying. Because all of the images like Cherbourg, but it just hides it because they're just compressed. Never mind. 14 portholes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 14 portholes on the Olympic in Cherbourg, bada bing. So it went at launch, there's even another. So I don't say a name. 14 portholes. I would like one in New York, but I think they're all of the starboard side, sadly. In Southampton. Southampton. Cool image. Aha! Yes. When it arrived in New York, it is clearly New York. One, it's got a New York steamer. 14 portholes. Oh yes. I'd like to see it with more New York stuff. Not going to see it there, sadly. I want port side photos. Why are they always on the starboard side? Plymouth, you can't say it. No, well. And then you see it by Plymouth, it's by there. There's 14, so this later on. But you can see at the early stages, Olympic had 14 portholes. How they get 16 is that, as I said, basically a pneumatic thing. Bang, bish, gone through. So he's saying this Titanic main voyage, 16 portholes. Yes, because it got 16 portholes later in its life. See if I can probably find an image, but I'm going to continue it whilst I do that.
Draw your own conclusions from that. Okay. So what other evidence do we have?
We're concluding that. Well, because you just lied and misconstrued evidence. Hello, prehistoric. So yeah, completely lied just because he's not shown a complete story. If you want to say he's mistaken, there you go. As I believe Stefan will probably go through with. So he's not shown he's shown Titanic at launch and then Titanic's main voyage and then concluded that it's Olympic because it's Olympic, but not showing a picture of Olympic with 16 portholes at launch or any time at any point. He's not even showing a picture of Olympic at launch when it had 14 portholes. If I go to an image here, this is Titanic in June. So it's just been moved, probably to near the Alexandra dry dock. at the wharf. Port side photos, please. Port side photos. You can see here, Titanic's keen to change. So let's 14 portholes. So it was a later edition to Titanic. So why, I know which image is going to come next. So I want to highlight this. This is B deck getting gutted. They removed the plating from B deck and they're adding the new areas, but they need to redo the plating to show it's Titanic. Or not to show it's Titanic, but they need to redo the plating so the windows match the layout of the things. I hope my mic works correctly. Please let me know if it does. So, B deck's been gutted. As you can see, and then this is Olympic picture with Olympic in the back, Titanic in the front. And you can see B deck still being gutted, so cabins can be added. It's Titanic later on. Some interior photos. And then here's Titanic in January, sorry. See, 16 portholes, the changes to the things, B deck, and you can see scaffolding is still there. That's after they riveted them all in. So you can see that this is still Titanic because it has the changes on B deck, just seen previously, and you can notice that it has now 16 portholes, as in this image, as in famously this image. You can see the engraves, lettering here. Things here and there. So they're still going. So you can see changes here, 16 portholes. They both have 16 portholes.
Okay, there are photos showing 16 portholes, one of which you've just seen by magic. Olympic was open to the public prior to its maiden voyage, and incidentally.
So, maiden voyage signal, yes, because it was given 16 portholes. Things that happened on Olympic were in the Titanic. So why did they add portholes to Titanic and Olympic? The room that these two portholes incorporate is the crew. It's a crew space. Might be the galley or something. It might just be a room. I can't exactly remember. Let me get a picture or something. It is the crew's galley. See here. What they had complained about is that not enough light was coming into the crew galley, and therefore they couldn't see much because they needed a lot of light, and there wasn't enough. They had like 3 bulbs or something, and there wasn't causing enough light. So they asked for 2 more, because at the night they couldn't have the lights on because it would interfere with the crow's nest and the bridge, because you don't want to have light in front of what you want to see when it's completely dark. So they added 2 more portholes, just so some more light can come in and also can air it out, and also so they added 2 more portholes to Olympic. And for Titanic as well, they just did the same because they knew it would have been a problem, so yes, added it to Titanic. Naturally. Same room, they're going to be same complaints, might as well have added Titanic. Seems logical. Titanic, Olympic opened to public prior to its main voyage, but not Titanic. Titanic did actually, was publicly added to its prior to its main voyage. So I will go to some Southampton picture. As we know, the news crews were added to Titanic, I believe, on the 9th. And yeah, so here is some like an image of Titanic on the 4th. So it's just arrived, and there are people on board, so people have been allowed to enter. And I believe due to the coal strike, they then did say, oh, because there's a coal issue, we're going to have to work this out, we're going to postpone it to the next day. And so people came on the next day. There's a famous photo with Beaslot. So, what are they? No, it doesn't. There's more people on there. See if I find an image. I'll have a look, but it was open to the public. Public was allowed on You can see this is people being on the ship. And these are like one of some images I use for like research or whatever. You can see, but the grain is it's the same camera. Yeah, whatever. The public was allowed on. There was even passengers allowed on the day before, and it was open to the public. And many people did go on. It was only postponed by a day because of the coal strike. Because they wanted to sort out coal situation before any of that.
Does anyone not find it strange, all the fuss and hoo-ha there was over Titanic's maiden voyage?
Yes, there was a coal strike.
And yet Olympic didn't get that. Why
Because it wasn't a coal strike.
would that be? Olympic was the first one off the production line. Surely that should have been reserved.
I love how it says there wasn't any issues with Olympic on its main voyage. Bloody, it sucked in a tugboat. And then it's had a lot of paint going and it hit the pier in New York. Had a lot of commotion. There was more to Titanic, of course, because obviously it sunk. But yeah, there was commotion to Olympic's main voyage. So much evidence says from contemporary Harland Wolff workers. So where is this? If he's gonna talk about a man called Paddy or Patrick or whatever his name is, it's already been massively debunked that he is a completely false person. He was not on the ship. There's no listing of him on the ship in any records. People say it was a stowaway. There's no evidence he was actually even on Carpathia when they delivered. His name is not listed on anything, and yet they say that this man is sound when there's literally no evidence to say that he was on the ship entirely. It was actually shown that he was actually in Australia when released in April 1912. So he was not on the ship, and yet people take him his word as gospel. So I have no idea where that comes from. There is something in a documentary, but there's literally no evidence to say any of that. One of the funniest things from Harland Wolff workers that still survive today is that Harland Wolff workers said, well, it was fine when we left, when it left us. We're just talking about Titanic. So it's kind of like a funny nod to the British was the ones who got Titanic sunk, not the Irish.
The first one off the production line, not the second one. But again, we'll come back to that.
Was it talking about slight difference? Yes. So Lawrence Beasley was a second-class passenger. He was a teacher on board. He was a teacher, where second-class status came to it, and he had a very good eye for noticing quite details. And he noticed that there was a 2.5 degree port list on the 13th of April, in the morning of 13th, and also said on the chronometer trim angle device. I can't remember what it was called. I think it was just called the trim gauge or something like that. Showed also that there was a 2.5 degree to port. Why is this? When Titanic set sail, the ship was unload. A lot of the coal was added to Titanic, and it caused a slight fire. This fire has been known to be smouldering because it caused no breathing issues for the people in the boiler room, and so it wasn't a raging fire because there wasn't much any breathing issues. So they didn't bother nosing it as a coal fire. It was just a smouldering fire that was caused by it, because fire needs air, fuel, and heat. Heat's going to come from the boilers, fuel's going to come from the coal, and oxygen's just going to come from the air. But it wasn't burning that much because the fire would have consumed a lot of the oxygen, which would have caused a lot of breathing issues, and that isn't the case. And these were people who were literally like in front of furnaces all their time, and they had no breathing issues. So it wasn't a very hot fire. It was just a smouldering one, and it was known from the 9th, and it was sorted on the early morning hours of the 13th. And how they sorted that was that they moved all the coal from the starboard side coal bunker where the fire was and moved it over to the port side, and they tried to unload it as quickly as they can. They only used the starboard side one to even do the port boilers, as they slowly moved all the coal to the port side, which caused a 600-ton displacement to the port side because there was more weight on the port side than the starboard side because it's not balanced, and so it caused a 2.5 degree port list. And with all Titanic's ballast points filled, there's nothing they can do about it. They're just sailing with a port list. But it's 2.5 degrees, it would have made very little difference. There's actually more evidence that coal fire actually would have saved more lives, because it would have counteracted a lot of the weight of the water entering the ship on the starboard side, so Titanic would have been upright a lot more for a lot longer, and until the lifeboats gave in, until obviously the breakup, and that wasn't really the only discomfort, but there was no real side to side to it. So yes, you notice there's definitely a port list. That was because of the coal fire and the way they sorted it.
Another little piece of evidence for a switch was that a guy called Lawrence Beasley was a second-class passenger.
So let's see what it says. Plus, sea trials should have been a full day on open sea. Brief hour jolt to life. That's actually not true. It took 12 hours. It took 12, even maybe 13 hours to do the whole thing. There was a speed test because that's by law. They have to do a speed test to make sure the engines are operating at a high revolution status, and if it can't do that, then it fails, because if the engines can't take a high revolution, then they're not going to go across the ocean. No full lifeboat test. The lifeboat test literally was just lower it out, move it to A deck, it can go up and down, fine, bring it back up, bring it on board, and they did it with every single one. Fine.
He mentioned it to the crew or to anybody who'd listened, but of course it was ignored.
Balance speaking. I've gone back. And so he clicked on some other things. So the crew went out and docked in Southampton, ready for its main voyage. Only 2 firemen soakers signed up for the voyage. No, actually 2 people actually missed Titanic. Those facts weren't there because a lot of people were actually on board. Many said we would have sailed her again. Literally no evidence of this. Many people were on board. A lot of people actually signed up for it, and a lot of people were trying to get on board. There were 2 brothers who were set to be stokers on the ship who decided to take an extra pint down Queen's Road, and they ended up missing the ship. And ironically, that then saved them, because they would have died if they didn't have that moment. So even during coal strikes, so there was a coal strike, but they moved everything on Titanic. So if you want to get working, more people would want to go on Titanic because it's the only ship sailing.
Docked at Southampton, having left Belfast earlier, ready for its maiden voyage. Only 2 firemen and stokers signed up for the voyage. Now this again leads me on to looking.
Why would they switch? Limerick was virtually worthless. Not true. It still had insurance, and it will say, if you want to save Vales from the Hawk to Titanic sinking, Olympic, or let's say March, then Olympic was sailing between November and March completely fine. There's literally no headlines on Olympic around that time other than Olympic had arrived in New York safely, blah blah blah. So Olympic was operating fine for between the time from the Hawk collision to fine, because as we saw earlier through the pictures, Olympic was repaired. Damage beyond economic repair. I believe there is documents. I will have to quickly look. I'm only going off memory for this. That Olympic and Harland Wolff used was about £1 million, I believe it cost to repair Olympic, because they had to obviously. And that was in total, they wasted time and not working on the ships in the shipyard and Titanic, and they had to pay people for that, and they had to move a lot of people over to Olympic and such. So a lot of people were lost a lot of money from the problems with Olympic, with losing time for Titanic. but they had to get all the plates out, resize the plates, get all the plates back in, strut the ship again to make sure it's supported, strut the frames that are supported, remove a lot of the damaged frames, because the frames were in sections, so you can remove them, but you need to support the ones above, so they're not doing, and the strakes around it. So a lot of the money would have gone into making these custom supports, and then also making the new plating to fix this, and then it needed to make a new propeller shaft, and then it needed to make 3 more propeller blades, and then it needed to also fix the damage to the engine crankshaft. I forgot even to mention that Titanic had Olympic had the crankshaft was cracked because the Hawk would have landed and warped and damaged the propeller shaft. That vibration just shot through the reciprocating engine and cracked the shaft.
Beyond economic repair, I believe. White Star Line and Harlan
But as we can see, they did repair it.
Wolf would have been bankrupted. So did Mr. Morgan. Well,
and what else is there? There's been bankrupt for insurance payouts. So I'll go on to insurance in a moment. I will have to cut it a bit short. It's been 2 hours. I may come back and do this tomorrow. Do the rest of the bit. So basically it's like an introduction. I'll come and finish it tomorrow. So did JP Morgans also see an opportunity to kill 2 birds with 1 stone? No. Thinking a £7.5 million ship is not worth it.
forever with an eye for the main chance. Look at it as an opportunity to kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
So he gone through his opponents. Strauss was in favour. Astor and Guggenheim showed no opposition. Tunez found several actions. No. Smith, known as Sheriff, no, he was considered the safest captain in the world, and he was described as a millionaire's captain. That's not because he was a millionaire, but that was because the actual millionaires would actually only sail on ships that he was captain of, because he was considered the safest captain. So Olympic had its collision with the Hawk. He's probably talking about the tugboat one. That was just unfortunate. The Hawk collision, which frankly wasn't really Olympic's fault, or Smith's fault, or anything. It wasn't even Olympic's fault. It was just the Hawk was so close. And then probably the propeller blade being thrown, which is, you're not going to be able to predict that. The Apollo, Germanic, Coptic, and Magnetic, and most of these, you didn't even talk about like the Celtic. Celtic was one of the most safest ships in the Boer War. Captain Smith was considered one of the safest captains in the world. Had very little accidents, but like every captain, he did have accidents. But it's very, he was one of the safest. So appalling safety track record. That is not true. He sailed on many ships and has actually had very, very little incidents with his ships. And his naval record is incredible. One of the best charters at the time.
That went down with his ship. He was actually, he had an
brought into Ismay's confidence. Right. His record used to leave. I don't know what that means. Told that Californian would be standing by. There's no evidence of this. Californian left Liverpool with a bunch of cargo. I can't remember. It might have been linen or something. It was mostly cargo, but it left from London and then got to Liverpool, and then it was headed for Boston. There's records in Liverpool still today of this being shown that it left, and it left before Titanic, and it would have been on the same route Titanic was going on, because there are lanes in the Atlantic, mostly just for safety and making sure you're getting to the right place. So this is not true. There's no evidence for this at all, and 2, it's not true because Californian was on his own thing to Boston. It just happened to be on the same one because Boston is the same route as New York. But Titanic took a 10-mile diversion south to try and avoid for, I think they wanted 20 miles, but it was actually 10 miles south to try and go under the ice field. And if you want to sink a ship, why wouldn't you just go straight into the ice field? Insisted on choosing his own crew. No, I don't believe he did that. Fairly confident people were just assigned by White Star Line to do because they were White Star Line employees. I believe he probably chose a lot of his higher-ups, but quartermaster and such would have been just employees of White Star Line. And even there was even a shuffle where Murdoch was the chief officer at the start, and then Officer Wilde came in and took over as chief officer. So one has no evidence for this either. Pecking order of existing officers affected, which is probably what I'm talking about, which is
Bruce's mate, who was the owner of
Chief Boss.
and basically he had to comply, but in doing so he insisted on choosing his own crew. Around, they brought in a new one and all the others went down a notch, which they weren't very happy about, but that did happen.
Yeah, it did. So you're talking about Wild was fine, that happened. Spy Girl tries to had difficult finding group. That's not true. Titanic left on time. Thousands out of work. What did they know? No. Letter to his sister. Yes, we have those letters to the sister. And he's probably going to make a note to saying, oh, I don't like this ship or something. It's not, he never said he didn't like the ship. Or at least, I don't remember he did. I've seen most of his letters, but it's been 2 years since I've read them. His letters are mostly just to his sister to say, I'm going to be fine, I'll see you there, send this to mother and stuff like that. And then I think he sent another one to his mother actually. I'll have to read them again. They are online, so feel free to look at them. I'll look at them for next stream. Chief Officer Wilde lays the sisters. Yes, fine. It's fully subscribed. I don't know what that means. I think around half full only, and yet they accepted people. Titanic passengers first class passenger only offered single cabin. Because first class was mostly full. A lot of them were actually got to first class anyway. It's just they said we have room on Titanic and we don't have enough coal to go onto all ships, so we're going to move all the coal to Titanic because it's big enough to hold everyone. And so go on here. What class are you? Right, we can only offer this and that and that and everything. Did you first get back and catch a fair reservation? We're doing a last minute. Friends and so one of the biggest ones at the time was someone who was actually slated for B-52, 54, 56, which was eventually turned into Ismay's cabin. Ismay's cabin, I believe, was going to be on C deck. I can't remember exactly. It might have been in the 70s, 50s. But there was the names was called, but anyway, they were to be on Titanic in that cabin, staterooms. But one of them had twisted ankle and was seeking medical attention, so couldn't make the voyage, and so copped out for that. JP Morgan, as we've shown, there's actually not much. It's believed that he had no ticket for Titanic. There's no evidence he's had a ticket for Titanic. It's believed he was invited because there was a telegram sent to JP Morgan saying, "Would you like to come on Titanic? It's sailing on this date." And the telegram replied saying, being held by business, and we know that he was meeting his organizer in the middle of April and also had his Venice art exhibition trip on the 23rd, so he had no time for Titanic. So he didn't pull out the last minute. He likely that he wasn't going to be on there in the first place. Also had 2 priceless bronzes removed. Where is this? There's no evidence of this. 2 days after sinking, Morgan seen in perfect health at French resort. This is because he had a serious disease, which was the thing that killed him later on. I will actually look at what's it called. Disease. Well, just say I could do it. I know it was something to do with his. There you go. He had It was this. Actually, no, it wasn't that. It was something else. It was something. You can have a look at what. He did have a serious illness. He did die from it the year after. And I can't remember what it was called. But he was very ill on and off because of this disease. I believe he contracted in 1890. I don't really know, but he had a serious disease and he did eventually die of it. He was ill on and off for a couple of decades before it eventually did kill him. So seeing him saying, "Oh, he's ill, amazing, perfect health," is not out of the ordinary. He had a lot of scares and then was fine later on.
This is all documented. J.P. Morgan.
Aha! I love to see that documentation he's presenting.
He was on it. And he actually rang from France and ordered some priceless bronzes that he was going to transport back to his home in America.
There's no evidence of this. He wouldn't have taken anything from Titanic. One, why would he? It's on the ship. Florence Ismay is also changed with accompanying husband last minute's illness. Yeah, probably. Why would, if Bruce Ismay would, if Ismay knew there was something up, if Ismay's wife knew there was something up, then Ismay would have known. If Ismay knew they were planning to sink the ship, he would not have gone on board. Why would he risk himself? He nearly didn't survive. Californian. No passengers, no cargo except. That is not true. They had linen stuff. I can't remember what it was cotton stuff. It was mostly just pure raw materials. And it was a full compartment of coal, like you would, because obviously you're going across the Atlantic. Yes. Because it was going to Boston. It left from Liverpool. So all of the stuff about a Californian is usually just trying to understand what they're doing and why it stopped, because there was a lot of blame on Californian as to why I did it. He's going to go on California. California's another time. So he's going on the main voyage. Right. I will stop it there and I will come back to this another time because I do have many other things to do. I mostly address what the point. Most of the things you will notice about this presentation is that he's not showing the evidence that shows these claims. Whereas if I show the evidence of the images of like Titanic and Olympic side by side and the differences between them, that's evidence to support my claim. When I say that Titanic had B-deck changes, I'm looking at images of the fitting out, images like them both together in Belfast. You can see Titanic, Olympic in the background and Titanic in the foreground. You can see there are holes where plating has been removed so Titanic can get changes. You can see it in here. You can sort of see it there. You can see it here. You can see it not there. You can see it here. See it here. These are from independent people. People are not. It is not from the same photographer, and yet they all show that B-deck is getting changed. A lot of these platings being removed, and they got scaffolding to add the new plates here, and then after that, that's pretty much right after launch, as they just start beginning, and then they make the change. And then what is the result of that? Those changes? Extension of the a la carte restaurant, added cabins along here, added staterooms along here. So we can see these changes, and there is evidence for them. I'm not making this stuff up. The claims I make have the evidence. And if I go to the image of both of them, you can see this is Titanic because it's not fully painted. It's still got scaffolding here, and there's got the poop chutes on the other side. So this is the one that's being built. And you can see there are the changes here. You can see the portholes here. Can't really see the portholes here, sadly. But you can see them here. But you can see the B-deck changes. Olympic. You can see it's Olympic because its hull is fully painted, and it's got no scaffolding or anything. It's just arrived. And you can see the B-deck is still enclosed. A-deck is open. Same with Titanic. But you can see the scaffolding is going to change that. So I have showed evidence for my claims, and yet from watching John Hammer's video, there is no evidence for his claims. He's made these claims and probably explained them, as it were, but they're not going to be outside of the possibility of what he's been saying. I wanted to mostly go on about the explanation of the points, not what he said. If you want to watch his full thing, feel free. I'm not going to say don't. I think you should, so you can understand it, but then do the research into what these are. But if you look at it, a lot of the images he's going to show are not there. So like, just images there. So hopefully later on, which it doesn't seem like he does, I want him to see show images of his claims. So like, it's just going to be generic photos. Really, I don't think it's going to be much. And then there's going to be stuff like that position is not correct, it was over here. The Samson does not believe it exists. The Mount Temple was way over here. So stuff like this, I will admit he is likely mistaken, because evidence has been come about and new and whatever, but whatever. So all I ask for love, if he goes on about this, I will have a field day. See what he says about that propeller. Grey undercoating, wow. Yes, had a grey undercoating, so the wreck. Was it? So yeah, so he's not even looked at the right side. So, and then the 401 stand on the side propeller, he's going to go back to the one that's, and then you talk about the iron lettering. This is been clearly CGI. This does not look like Titanic's, the footage of the Titanic. So, and he goes on a bunch of it, and he probably makes a conclusion. I'll go through most of the points. I think I got to about 43, whatever, yeah. Yeah. I want to see, most switchvids don't show evidence for their claims. And if they do, they are not showing it accurately. Like with the images showing Olymp Titanic in voyage and during launch, they show the 14 portholes and then the 16 portholes. They won't look at the evidence to show the contrary. That Olympic also had 14 portholes in at launch, I mean, and also at the beginning of its service. It got it later on, and they're not going to make us consider that. And then someone on Twitter, for instance, or X, was talking about that. Go to a launch image about one of the side drainage points on Titanic. You can see here there isn't a side drainage point. I'll go to my model because I can't be bothered. Which is, go to the other side. This port here, and you can see it in more recent images. They're here. It's just a drainage port, I believe. I remember exactly. Anyway, it's just a cut in the hull, but it wasn't there at the start. And they're going to say, oh, but it's shown in Southampton that it has that gap. I'll even go to the right side. See, it's got that cutout. But then if you look at Olympic and its launch, you'll see launch images. I'm blind. I literally had launch images up earlier. Oh, there it is. Look at images of Olympic. It too does not have that gap. I'll even go on the right side. It doesn't have that cutout. So you can't use that argument. It has 14 portholes and stuff like that. So that's usually how they work. This image shows this, and this image shows this. They are different. I'm going to label one as Olympic and one as Titanic to show they're different, and they're kind of lying about it because then, one, not labeling the ship correctly, and two, not telling you that there's a gap between these photos. At Olympic, for Titanic's launch, it was May 31st, 1911, and it set sail on April, and it left Belfast on April 1st. No, April 2nd. Yes. 1912. That's a large gap. That's nearly a year's gap. It's like 10 to 11 months of a gap, or 10 months of a gap between them. And as we can see from images between them, Titanic was being changed, and there were differences added to Titanic, mostly from feedback from Olympic. And then there was stuff added to Olympic that was also added to Titanic. And then there were features that they noticed wasn't being used on Olympic, so they changed on Titanic and stuff like that. And all these changes we see on Olympic, or all these changes we see on Titanic, are seen at the wreck. It's so clear that Titanic is the one at the bottom, but the people won't say anything about it because Titanic and Olympic just look too similar, and they don't look at the fine details of these things, and they're not going to look at all the evidence between the launch and the main sail, so they're not going to know. They're going to be told that the likes that, for instance, famous photo, usually gets you, they're going to say, this is Olympic, and then they're not going to look at it properly, even though it says Titanic on the front. But they're going to say, it's because it says this is the swapped version of Olympic. It is when Olympic and Titanic had been swapped and they changed everything and whatever. And it's just not correct. So he'll probably go on to propeller, which I hope so, because I've talked about propeller, or he does. Then the 401. I'll quickly gloss over it, and I'll talk about more when I get to that point. The propeller, Olympic flew the propeller in late January, I think it was the 28th, and got to Belfast on March 1st. And it was a portside propeller, and that is usually when it's believed that Olympic got a version of Titanic's propeller, or one of Titanic's propellers, so it can be quickly added. But we have documents that I'll probably be able to find, actually. Titanic Central propeller. I know how to find it online. I have it saved. Actually, I have it saved. What am I doing? The documents show that their propellers were not interchangeable. The propellers weren't changeable. You can see all of them are different, but Olympics eventually started off with a 33 pitch and eventually seems to have gone to 41, and then Titanic had a 35. They're not the same. They are not the same propellers or propeller blades. And even if you go by this one, Olympic had a 4 propeller blade, Titanic had a 3 propeller blade. You can see it here, and it's listed at the top here. These are the blade numbers, and this is the pitch and diameter and area and everything like that. So Titanic's propellers and Olympic's propellers weren't the same. Most of it was the same. So we see by a lot of this, the engine details, the engines are going to be the same and everything. You can see here, and all the listings up here. Whilst Titanic's, the only thing different between them is that the blades were different and the pitches were different. They were mostly the same size, but we see the blades pitch were different. So you can't put one of Titanic's blade onto Olympic because the pitches weren't the same, and therefore you'd get vibrations from that. So it's very unlikely that Olympic did get any of Titanic's propeller blades, and it is also common that they just had spare ones for Olympic. If they're going to change one of them to be different than the other, that's going to cause vibrations. So they just made the same ones and had some spares. And when people say, it's because of that, and yet it shows that Olympic's port propeller was the one that was damaged. Picture of it as well. And so they had to change that propeller because they lost a port propeller, as you can see. And had to go all out and everything, get it properly sorted, and add a new propeller blade and everything. So you do have one there in the center, one before. The Olympic, this was in March 1912, Olympic got a new propeller, but they didn't change all of them because obviously if it's so quick, you have to change all of them, which is going to take a couple of days. So they only changed one propeller, and they're not going to use Titanic's propeller because it's different to the ones on Olympic. and also Titanic's ones have been installed in February, so they're not going to be able to do that. So they would have to take it off Titanic to then put it on Olympic. So, but they're not going to do that because it's not the same propeller pitch. It's going to cause vibrations. So they're not going to use Titanic's propeller blade. But the one that says, but the propeller that says 401 on it is the starboard propeller. Or at least they all say 401, but it's very clear on the starboard propeller for at a wreck, it says 401. So that shows that the wreck is Titanic because it has a blade only for Titanic, and the only blade it could have gone on for Olympic was in March, was on the port side, and yet 401 is seen on the starboard side. So it's more evidence that it's clearly Titanic. So went on a bit of a tangent there for about 15 minutes. But anyway, I'll probably stream again tomorrow just so I can get most of the rest of it done. If not, I'll do it in the future. I just wanted to highlight, and I thought I'd do a stream so I can just give my blurb our thoughts, and if people are here, and they can see it. If not, then watch the video later. Anyway, it's a long video. Maybe I'll do snippets later. But yeah, so I just gone through some of it. Most of it, it's just there's no evidence. He's showing no evidence, and he is not showing he's misleading the audience. Now, can he be mistaken? I don't think so, because all of his evidence is just literally pretty much the same as what is seen in Robin Gardner's book, like Riddles of the Titanic and The Ship That Never Sank and such like that. But yes, right, I'll continue this another time, and thank you for watching this. Hopefully I helped show some bits. Feel free to ask questions.